You were never meant to stay in the wreckage. You were just taught to call it love. There comes a moment after the chaos, after the silence, when the empath doesn't just leave the narcissist behind. They evolve. Something quiet shifts beneath the skin. Not rage, not revenge. Just this deep, unshakable clarity. And with it comes power, the kind the narcissist never expected you to find. In part 1, we spoke about waking up, about understanding their pain and finally refusing to carry it. But this is about what comes next. When the empath stops explaining, stops excusing, stops rescuing, and starts rebuilding. Not just recovering from the relationship, but rewriting the rules of every relationship after. This is where the narcissist loses more than attention. They lose the ability to define you, because you're no longer available to be triggered, no longer in the role they cast for you, no longer in orbit. And when you rise with boundaries, vision, and voice, they're left with nothing to control but their own collapse. In this next part, we'll go deeper into that shift, the aftermath, the reclaiming, the structure of self-respect. You'll learn how to rebuild your emotional architecture with Stoic strength and how modern psychology like Jordan Peterson's insights backs what your soul already knows: you were never weak for loving. Only unfinished. If you're ready for that next chapter, stay with us. Victory Stoic isn't here to just help you leave the fire. We're here to help you become the kind of person who no longer walks into it. This is where you begin again, but this time without apology. Number 6, they stopped needing to be understood and started choosing freedom. There's a specific ache that lives in the bones of every empath, of the desperation to be understood, not agreed with, just seen clearly without distortion. It's the ache of constantly having to defend your reality in a world where someone keeps editing the script. The narcissist doesn't argue to understand. They argue to win. And every time the empath tries to explain their pain, it's like screaming into a funhouse mirror. Your truth returns to you, warped, twisted, and weaponized. So the empath tries harder. They write longer messages, choose softer words. They cry in ways that don't make the narcissist uncomfortable. And for a while, it works until it doesn't. Because no matter how gently they speak, the narcissist hears accusation. No matter how honest they are, the narcissist hears betrayal. And slowly the empath begins to believe that maybe the truth isn't worth the trouble, that maybe peace can only come if they're silent. But then something rare happens. The empath stops performing. They stop seeking validation from someone committed to misunderstanding them. And in that moment, something breaks, but it's not the empath, it's the cycle. Because now they've remembered something sacred. The truth doesn't need to be accepted to be real. Take Rachel, 33, a freelance writer in Seattle. She was with a man who could never quite hear her. If she said she was hurt, he'd say she was too sensitive. If she explained why something bothered her, he'd shift the focus to how she brought it up. Eventually, Rachel began rehearsing every conversation before it happened, trying to calculate how not to be misunderstood. She'd replay arguments for days, wondering if she was crazy. But the real fracture came one night when she said, "I feel unseen," and he replied, "That's your problem." That sentence meant to open space was turned into a weapon. Rachel stayed quiet the rest of the evening. She realized there was no sentence pure enough to protect her from his deflection. That night, she didn't fight. She didn't write the usual email explaining her side. She sat with herself, and for the first time in years, she asked, "Why do I keep needing him to get it?" Psychologist Dr. Jennifer Freed coined the term betrayal blindness, the ability to remain unaware of abuse when awareness would threaten a vital relationship. Empaths often live in this blindness, justifying, adjusting, explaining, because to admit the narcissist doesn't care would collapse the relationship. But clarity, always costs less than confusion. The day Rachel stopped needing to be understood was the day she started to heal. Peterson says, you must stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Otherwise, you'll mistake exhaustion for communication. This isn't just advice, it's survival. Empaths lose years trying to build a bridge to someone who only wants control of the river. But truth doesn't require consensus. It only requires courage. The Stoics, too, warned against attachment to opinion. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In modern terms, being misunderstood doesn't make you wrong. It makes you free. Here's an image. Imagine carrying a mirror through a carnival. Every person you pass reflects a different version of you. Some taller, some distorted, some monstrous. That's what life is like when your self-worth depends on how others see you. But freedom begins the moment you put the mirror down and say, this is who I am, even if no one reflects it back. So what does freedom look like in practice? It looks like shorter replies. It looks like letting a false accusation hang in the air without correcting it. It looks like walking out of a room not to flee, but to reclaim breath. It's understanding that being misunderstood by someone who benefits from your silence is not injustice. It's expected. And when you stop needing them to get it, you start getting back your life. Rachel began a practice called truth journaling. Every time she felt the need to explain, she wrote her truth instead. Not to share. Just to remind herself, this happened. This is how I felt. This is what I know. Over time, her journal became thicker. Her silence became stronger, not passive, rooted. Because when you no longer need someone else to verify your reality, their gaslighting runs out of oxygen. In a 2019 study published in Personality and Social Psychology, Bulletin researchers found that individuals who are highly agreeable are more likely to over-explain in conflict, especially when the other party is emotionally invalidating. The cost: chronic anxiety, identity diffusion, and emotional fatigue. But the study also found that setting internal anchors, truth statements you repeat to yourself, restores stability even in hostile environments. Here's a tip you can start using today. Write one sentence on a card that affirms your lived experience. Something like, my experience is valid even if it's denied. Or I do not owe an explanation for what I know to be true. Carry it with you. Touch it when you feel yourself slipping into old habits. It's not just a sentence, it's a shield. Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus taught, what is noble must be pursued, even if misunderstood. The opinion of others is no compass for the wise. Let that sink in. If you wait for the narcissist to validate your perspective, you're asking a blind man to admire a sunset. You don't need their vision, you need your own. Here's the truth. They never misunderstood you by accident. They misunderstood you on purpose, because clarity would have required change. And narcissists don't change. They adapt the story so they don't have to. But you're no longer part of the story. You're writing your own. You don't explain anymore. You express to yourself. You don't perform. You protect. You don't stay to be seen. You leave to be whole. Because now finally you know, your truth doesn't need to be accepted to set you free. And if the urge returns, because it will, to clarify, to re-explain, to find the perfect words that will finally make them understand, pause. Remind yourself you are not a lawyer defending your life. You are a human being, and your lived experience does not need to pass someone else's filter to be real. Think of a lighthouse. It doesn't argue with the dark sea. It doesn't chase ships to convince them it's bright. It stands. It shines. That's what healed empathy looks like. Not noise, not performance. Just presence. Just truth. Steady, quiet, sovereign. You don't owe your story to someone who only listens to rewrite it. And you don't have to bleed your truth into the ears of people who wear misunderstanding as armor. Let them think what they want. Let the false narrative float. You've stopped explaining not because you lost, but because you woke up to the reality that your freedom is louder than their approval. So if this truth finds you, now hold it close. Your clarity is no longer on trial. Your peace is no longer up for debate. You are not misunderstood. You are done performing. Number 7. The narcissist is left behind, screaming, smearing, and sinking. While you rise and watch from the heights, they screamed when you stopped playing. They raged when their tricks stopped working. They spread rumors, crafted lies, played the wounded saint. They whispered poison into every ear that would listen, painting you as cold, cruel, unstable, disloyal. But what burned them the most wasn't your silence. It was your glow. Because while they were busy clawing at your shadow, you were already in the light, becoming someone they never thought you'd be without them. This is the narcissist's apocalypse. Not your anger, not your revenge, not even your indifference, but your success, your calm, your peace, your body getting stronger, your mind sharper, your spirit clear. They wanted you curled up in shame. They got you standing in sunlight, alone, complete. As philosopher Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You reacted by rising. They thought they broke you, but they miscalculated. They thought all that pain would make you bitter, but it made you disciplined. They thought the smear campaign would isolate you, but it made room for the people who actually see you. They thought you'd come back. You didn't. You became. Jordan Peterson warns of the archetype of the tyrant, someone who uses chaos to manipulate others into dependency. Narcissists are emotional tyrants. They keep you off balance so you can't stand tall. They provoke and then blame, hurt you and then cry. But Peterson also says, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. And the empath who ascends doesn't retaliate. They outgrow. This truth is brutal. Narcissists don't miss you. They miss the version of themselves they could access through you. You were the mirror, the praise machine, the fixer, the excuse. Without you, they face the void. So they scream not out of pain, but out of loss of control. That's what all the gossip is about. That's what the you changed messages mean. That's what the fake apology after months of silence really says. I'm still trying to script the ending. But the ending already happened. It was quiet. It was sacred. It was the first day you woke up and didn't check your phone, hoping they'd said something kind. It was the moment you signed up for that class, applied for that job, returned to the gym, stopped explaining yourself to people who never really listened. It was when your life stopped revolving around survival and started orbiting purpose. There's a story of a woman named Alina, 43. Her ex painted her as unstable after she left him, told friends she was cold, heartless, not who she pretended to be. Meanwhile, Alina was rebuilding, going to therapy, starting her own small business, reconnecting with her creativity. At first, the smear campaign hurt. But something changed the day she got an email from a former mutual friend who said, "You look so peaceful." I don't know what he was talking about. That's when Alina realized the truth always leaks through peace. A study published in Personality Disorders Theory Research and Treatment 2017 found that narcissists engage in reputation protection behaviors post-breakup at extreme levels, particularly when their control is threatened. They use manipulation, gossip, triangulation, not because they are moving on, but because they can't. They are stuck in a moment that no longer includes them. And your peace feels like betrayal to someone who only knew how to bond through chaos. So what do? You do not defend yourself. You do not correct their story. You do not chase after truth in rooms where everyone is drinking lies. You build. You create. You focus on your health, your purpose, your rituals. You become boring to their drama. Here's a daily practice. The 1-hour ascent. Every day, give 1 hour to something that expands you, not for anyone's approval, not for applause, just for the quiet fire inside you. Read a book, lift weights, learn a skill, sit in silence. The narcissist operated on urgency and reactivity. You now move with intention. Peterson calls this ordering your being. In his words, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. You no longer live in their collapsing castle. You are building a fortress of integrity brick by brick in private. And when people ask where you went, the answer is simple: up. From up here, the landscape is different. You see the patterns more clearly. The old triggers don't sting. The chaos no longer pulls. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You recognize their smear campaign for what it is: the last gasps of someone choking on the absence of your attention. You see the wreckage not with hatred, but with distance. You no longer want justice. You want peace. And that peace is loud. Louder than their rumors. Louder than their crocodile tears. Louder than the silence they used to weaponize. Because this time, you're not silent out of fear. You're silent because you've outgrown the volume of their world. They said you'd never survive without them. But here you are not just surviving, but thriving. Not performing joy for social media, but living it. Not proving a point, but embodying it. You don't need to say a word. Your existence is the full sentence. They are left behind not because you pushed them down, but because you kept climbing. And they refused to climb with you. They built a kingdom on manipulation. You built a life on truth. And truth always wins. Even when it says nothing at all. Number 8. The narcissist needs a mirror. The empath turns off the light. They don't scream when you leave. They scream when you go silent. They don't collapse when you confront them. They collapse when you no longer care. They don't fear abandonment. They fear irrelevance. The narcissist survives by reflection. Not self-reflection, they're incapable of that. What they need is your reflection, your attention, your reactions, your presence, your light. They stand in front of you like a cracked mirror demanding that you validate their illusion of grandeur. As long as you reflect it, the illusion lives. The moment you turn away, they vanish into themselves, a hollow, echoing space where the ego screams, but no one listens. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Narcissists, in contrast, spend their lives performing what they believe goodness looks like. But they cannot be it because there is no center, no core, just performance. They are actors without a script, depending entirely on the audience to applaud and interpret. Without applause, they are nothing. Without an empath feeding them emotional cues, they are blind. Jordan Peterson often speaks about the necessity of confronting the shadow, the dark parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore. But narcissists don't confront their shadow. They project it onto others, especially the empath, and manipulate them into carrying it. Peterson said, "The purpose of life is finding the largest burden that you can bear, and bearing it." The empath often mistakes carrying the narcissist's pain for virtue. But it is not virtue to carry someone else's unresolved shadow at the cost of your own soul. Here's the trap. Narcissists don't love the empath. They love how they feel when the empath is around. That's why when the empath goes silent, truly silent, not angry or pleading, the narcissist spirals. The empath has removed the mirror. No more reflection. No more borrowed light. only the darkness they've spent years avoiding. In 2021, a psychological study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that narcissists exhibit extreme distress, not when they are disliked, but when they are ignored. This aligns with the Stoic principle that what disturbs us is not things themselves, but our judgments about them. Epictetus. Narcissists are disturbed not by actual rejection, but by the absence of recognition. To not exist in someone else's mental space is to not exist at all. Imagine a man in his late 40s, call him Jack. Jack is charming, successful, seemingly confident. His partner, Claire, is the classic empath, attentive, emotionally intelligent, and conflict-averse. Over 10 years, Jack chipped away at her sense of self. He made jokes about her appearance in front of friends, then told her she was too sensitive when she flinched. He dismissed her needs as needy and invalidated every attempt at emotional connection with mockery or indifference. Claire tried harder. She read books, went to therapy, blamed herself. She believed, like many empaths do, that if she could just understand him better, she could love him into wholeness. But love doesn't fix narcissism. It feeds it. One day, Claire didn't fight back. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She didn't even announce that she was done. She just went quiet. She moved out. She left no letter, no drama, no trail of closure. Just silence. For Jack, this was not peace. It was obliteration. Why? Because silence is the one thing a narcissist cannot weaponize. They can twist your anger. They can rewrite your words. They can manipulate your pity. But silence is a locked door with no key. The Stoics taught that true freedom is internal. It's not about changing the world, it's about changing how you relate to it. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. When the empath stops reacting, they reclaim their power. They stop being a mirror and start being a boundary. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. Jordan Peterson warns against the chaos of undefined emotional boundaries. He said, if you're not capable of cruelty, you're absolutely a victim to anyone who is. The empath doesn't become cruel, but they become capable of restraint, capable of stepping back, capable of turning off the emotional faucet that once nourished a toxic system. So how can you practice this? Here's one step: the 48-hour rule. When you feel triggered by a narcissist, they're baiting, their guilt trips, their silence treatments, don't respond for 48 hours. Don't explain. Don't defend. Don't react. Just observe. You will see their panic begin to seep through the cracks. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped feeding them. Another practice. Write a letter you'll never send. Pour out every emotion, every betrayal, every realization. But keep it for yourself. This is not closure for them. It's clarity for you. You don't need to make them understand. You need to understand that their understanding isn't your job anymore. In evolutionary psychology, humans are wired to respond to emotional stimuli, especially distress signals. Empaths are hypersensitive to these. But chronic exposure to manipulation rewires the brain toward hypervigilance, exhaustion, and self-doubt. Silence resets the nervous system. You're not ghosting them. You're coming home to yourself. The deepest revenge is not retaliation. It's regeneration. When the narcissist no longer has your reflection, they are left with their real face one. They've avoided their entire lives. No more spotlight. No more adoration. Just silence. Just the echo of a story that no longer includes you. That is what truly terrifies them. And if number 8 struck something deep inside you, comment the number 8 below. Let us know that this one hit, that this one woke you up, that this one spoke your truth. And if you've ever been the mirror and you've had to turn off the light, tell us how. Tell us what happened. Number 9, When the empath starts loving themselves, they step out of the victim role and the abuser loses their script. There is a moment quiet, unremarkable to outsiders. When the empath finally looks in the mirror, no longer sees a broken version of themselves. They don't see someone to fix. They don't see someone to blame. They see someone worth saving. That moment doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with grief. Grief for the years spent trying to be enough for someone who was never going to see them. Grief for the identity shaped by pain. But with that grief comes clarity. And with clarity comes the end of the performance. A narcissist can only dominate if the other person agrees to the role of victim. It is a two-character play manipulator and manipulated aggressor and appeaser gaslighter and confused. When the empath walks off the stage, the narcissist is left with a monologue no one's listening to. The performance collapses. The script dies in their throat. The applause they were chasing fades into silence. Psychologist Dr. Carol McBride, a specialist in narcissistic abuse, writes narcissists need people who will give up their own needs for theirs. The empath conditioned to please becomes the perfect supply until they stop. Until they stop apologizing for existing. Until they stop explaining their feelings. Until they stop shrinking. Loving yourself in this context isn't self-help fluff. It's revolutionary disobedience. Jordan Peterson argues that you cannot be good until you are capable of being dangerous and have it under voluntary control. That applies here. When the empath loves themselves, they stop fearing solitude. They stop negotiating their worth. They become dangerous, not violent, but untouchable. They are no longer malleable, no longer eager to be reshaped to fit someone else's insecurity. A man named Eric, 52, lived this. For years, he stayed in a marriage where he was constantly dismissed, undermined, and emotionally manipulated by his wife. She mocked his emotions, called him too sensitive, withheld affection, then blamed him for their distance. Eric raised with the belief that men should endure internalized every blow. He believed her version of him, that he was weak, dramatic, not enough. Until one therapy session broke the illusion. The therapist asked him one question. When was the last time you felt at peace in this relationship? Eric had no answer. That silence became his turning point. He started lifting again. He reconnected with friends he had abandoned out of guilt. He began journaling, not to explain himself to her, but to hear himself clearly for the first time in decades. And most importantly, he stopped justifying his pain. That was when the argument stopped. Not because she changed, but because he did. He no longer needed her to validate his reality. He had his own. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The empath who learns to love themselves begins to master their inner world. They stop being emotional prey. They begin to choose, not react, not chase, not fix. They walk away without bitterness because their worth is no longer tied to being accepted. Psychologically, this is supported by schema therapy, which shows that childhood patterns like people-pleasing or self-sacrifice often resurface in toxic adult relationships. But once those patterns are seen and named, they can be broken. Awareness breaks the loop. Self-love isn't a feeling. It's a practice. It's meal prepping. It's walking. It's turning off your phone when someone is pushing your buttons. It's saying no and not explaining why. Here's a practical tip, the 3 yes rule. Before you agree to anything, ask yourself, do I genuinely want this too? Does this align with my values? 3. Will I feel at peace after saying yes? And if you can't answer yes to all 3, you don't say yes. You're not here to be agreeable. You're here to be real. Peterson also says, the better you are at noticing what you actually want and need, the more likely you are to move toward order instead of chaos. Narcissists thrive in chaos, miscommunication, second-guessing insecurity. When you anchor into self-respect, that chaos becomes noise you no longer tune into. The day the empath begins loving themselves, they stop needing permission to feel whole. They are no longer triggered by rejection because they no longer outsource their value. The narcissist, once able to press every button, now faces a board gone dark. The victim has left the building. There is no act left to play. And the abuser, stripped of power, voice, and audience, is left with nothing but themselves. That is their real punishment. Number 10. The narcissist made you feel small. But you leaving the story was the plot twist they never saw coming. They belittled you without raising their voice. They shrank your confidence with compliments that carried poison tips. They made you feel like a burden, a drama queen, a disappointment, all while wearing the mask of care. And you believed it. Not because you were weak, but because you were loyal. Because you were wired to make sense of chaos by blaming yourself. Because you mistook control for closeness and survival for love. Narcissists don't destroy you with fists. They destroy you with narratives, twisted realities, where they are the misunderstood hero and you are the ungrateful storm. They feed you a story where every tear you shed is too much, every boundary you draw is unreasonable, and every attempt to be seen is attention-seeking. And the more you play along, the smaller you become, until the day you stop acting. You don't slam the door. You don't scream, "I'm done." You just stop showing up to the scene. You leave the script on the table and walk out mid-act. You stop explaining your silence. You stop hoping they'll understand. You leave not because you want them to suffer, but because you're finally done suffering. That's not revenge. That's resurrection. Jordan Peterson said, "If you stay in a situation where your soul is being corrupted, eventually you will become the monster you're trying to avoid." That's the trap for empaths, trying so hard to save the narcissist that they lose themselves. The longer you stay, the more your boundaries blur, your dignity erodes, your light dims. Walking away isn't quitting. It's refusing to participate in your own undoing. And when you leave, something remarkable happens. They don't chase you to apologize. They chase you to reassert the story. They want you back in the play. Not because they love you, but because without you, the narrative collapses. You were the tension, the arc, the contrast that made their role shine. You were the audience, the mirror, the proof. Without you, it's just them facing the silence they fear most. Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." Walking away without needing to win, without needing to explain, without needing closure, that is Stoic bravery. You're not fighting for control. You're reclaiming your peace. You don't need to burn the bridge. You just need to stop crossing it. Case in point, Michelle, 45, spent 8 years in a relationship with a partner who never yelled, never hit, but always made her feel like a failure. He'd say things like, "I'm just trying to help," when criticizing her appearance. Or, "Why are you always so emotional?" when she tried to express hurt. She twisted herself into knots to be more palatable, more predictable, more pleasing. Until one day, after a particularly hollow anniversary dinner, she realized, "He doesn't even know who I am, because I've stopped being me around him." She didn't make a scene. She packed her things quietly, changed her number, and disappeared from the story. Months later, he sent messages like, "You think you're better than me, and you never even gave us a chance." But she didn't reply, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had finally said enough to herself. From a psychological standpoint, this is identity reclamation. Narcissists use a tactic called identity erosion, where over time the victim's preferences, opinions, even memories become blurred. That's why leaving feels terrifying, because you're not just leaving them. You're leaving the version of yourself they built to suit them. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. Authenticity, solid ground. Practice this, the who am I without them exercise. List out things you love that have nothing to do with them. Music, food, mornings, dreams. Relearn your own texture, your voice, your damn laugh. You are not a supporting character. You are the author. And the story does not end with their approval. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter." The right thing in this case is walking away, without bitterness, without theatrics, with dignity. The narcissist wants a dramatic ending, something to twist, blame, and obsess over. You give them none. You exit the stage without applause. Just the sound of your own footsteps, steady, whole, and final. You don't win the game. You stop playing it. And that to them is the most unbearable ending imaginable. Conclusion: you didn't win. You outgrew the war. There is no grand finale when you walk away from a narcissist. No cinematic ending, no swelling music or perfect one-liner. There's just quiet. Clean, piercing, undeniable quiet. The kind that comes not from running away, but from finally coming home to yourself. And in that quiet, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing to be understood by someone who built their power on misunderstanding you. The narcissist wanted a villain, a scapegoat, a broken mirror to blame for their own fractures. But instead, you handed them an empty stage. You didn't stay to argue. You didn't return to correct their lies. You didn't lower yourself to clap back. You just kept building. You just kept rising. And from where you stand now, high above the wreckage, their noise sounds smaller than ever. This is the punchline of their entire performance. The one who once made you feel like nothing now watches you become everything without them. Their legacy is the lesson. Your legacy is what you do with it. You are not their ex. You are not their regret. You are the proof that healing is louder than hate and far more permanent. In the end, you didn't fight fire with fire. You became water calm, powerful, essential. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control what others say, think, or do. We can only control what we respond to. And you responded by growing. You answered chaos with discipline. You took back your life not with a scream, but with a choice. And that is the final blow they never saw coming. If this message hit something deep in you, if you felt seen, called out, or finally understood, do one thing right now, like, share, and subscribe to Victory Stoic. This isn't just another channel. This is where silence becomes strength, where philosophy meets reality, where your pain becomes power. Drop a 1 in the comments if this video spoke to your soul. Drop a 0 if it didn't hit quite right. We value your honesty. But more than that, if you've been through this storm, share your story. Your journey could be the lifeline for someone else still trapped in the wreckage. We read every word, and we honor the strength it takes to speak. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for listening all the way through. You could have been anywhere, but you were here facing this truth with us. Until next time, remember, you don't have to destroy them. You just have to stop needing them. This is Victory Stoic, and your rise is only beginning.